Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson. Picture this for a second. You're 30 years old, bursting with talent and brilliance, but somehow you still haven't quite broken through. You're hunting for a new gig, dreaming of a fresh start in a new city. So you do what any ambitious person would do. You write a cover letter to the most powerful guy you can find, a duke, a ruler, someone who can change everything. And in this letter, you go all in on your engineering credentials. You tell him you can design bridges that enemies could never destroy, that you know the secrets of redirecting entire rivers. You mention your invention of cannons that rain hell like a hailstorm, and these incredible armored vehicles, basically tanks, that can bulldoze through enemy forces. 10 full paragraphs of military genius and engineering wizardry. Then, almost like you forgot something, you toss in one final line at the very end. You write, "Oh, and by the way, I can pretty much do anything when it comes to painting." The guy who wrote that letter? Leonardo da Vinci. And yes, turns out he could do anything when it came to painting. He went on to create the two most recognizable paintings on planet Earth, The Last Supper and the Mona Lisa. But here's the thing. In his own mind, painting was just one color in his palette. He saw himself as a scientist, an engineer, a professional wonderer who never stopped asking questions. Today, we're jumping into Walter Isaacson's brilliant biography, Leonardo da Vinci. This isn't your typical dusty art history lecture. This is the story of a mind that danced with the universe itself, a mind that laughed at boundaries and refused to be labeled. Millions of readers have fallen in love with this book because it reveals something revolutionary. Genius isn't some mystical gift from the heavens. It's something you build, brick by brick, through the way you think and the way you see the world. Leonardo was a beautiful misfit, born on the wrong side of the sheets, gay, vegetarian, left-handed, and hilariously distractible. And by the time we're done today, you'll discover his greatest secret, that true creativity isn't about mastering just one thing. It's about seeing the hidden threads connecting everything. It's recognizing that the spiral of a curl in someone's hair follows the exact same mathematical dance as water spinning down a drain. It's understanding that if you want to paint the world's most mysterious smile, you first need to dissect the muscles of a human face. So let's dive into the mind of history's most gloriously curious human being. Our story kicks off with what might be the luckiest accident in history. Leonardo da Vinci was born illegitimate. Now, stick with me here, because in 15th century Florence, this was actually the best thing that could have happened to him. His family had been churning out notaries for 5 straight generations, respectable, buttoned-up legal professionals who drafted contracts and followed the rules. If Leonardo had been born a legitimate firstborn son, that would have been his prison sentence. He'd have spent his days shuffling papers instead of dreaming up flying machines. Instead, he arrived in 1452, the result of an affair between Ser Piero, a successful notary, and a young orphaned peasant woman named Caterina. His grandfather simply jotted in the family journal, "A grandson was born to me. He bears the name Leonardo." His mother? Not even worth mentioning. Shortly after his birth, his father married someone from his own social class, and Caterina was married off to a local farmer. From day one, Leonardo was an outsider looking in. He belonged to a respectable family, but only sort of. He existed in this weird in-between space, never fully inside, never completely outside, and this feeling of being a permanent observer would shape everything he created. The second gift his illegitimacy gave him was no fancy education. He went to what they called an abacus school, basically math for merchants, but he never properly learned Latin, the language that separated the educated elite from everyone else. This bothered him his whole life. He called himself an unlettered man. But this supposed weakness was secretly his superpower. Because he wasn't trained to worship ancient books and dusty authorities, he taught himself something far more radical: to learn from experience, to observe, to test, to trust his own eyes. He who can go to the fountain, Leonardo once wrote, does not go to the water jar. He became what he proudly called himself, a disciple of experience. This freed his mind completely. He could question everything without feeling guilty about it. And boy, did he question things. His laboratory was planet Earth, and his research tools were his two eyes and a little notebook he kept tied to his belt. These notebooks are perhaps his greatest masterpiece. Over 7,000 pages survive, and they're the most mind-blowing record of human curiosity ever created. Reading them is like watching someone's brain explode in slow motion. On a single page, you might find a sketch for a flying machine next to a math equation, next to a drawing of leg muscles, next to a recipe for hair dye, next to his grocery list, next to a hilarious doodle of some weird-looking dude he saw on the street. There's no organization, no neat little categories. To Leonardo, it was all one big, beautiful web. Art was science. Science was art. Everything connected to everything else. His to-do lists are legendary. They weren't filled with pick up dry cleaning or call mom. They were lists of burning questions. Get the master of arithmetic to show you how to square a triangle. Ask Giannino the Bombardier about how the Tower of Ferrara is walled. He wanted to know how people walked on ice in Flanders. His curiosity had no off switch. And then there's this entry that perfectly captures who he was. Describe the tongue of the woodpecker. Just sit with that for a second. Who wakes up one day and thinks, you know what I absolutely need to know? What does a woodpecker's tongue look like? How would you even figure that out? He didn't need this information for a painting commission. He needed it because he was Leonardo, and the world was an endless buffet of fascinating questions. This obsessive curiosity kicked into high gear around age 12, when his father brought him from the quiet countryside of Vinci to the buzzing energy of Florence. It was the perfect playground for a mind like his. Florence in the 1400s was basically the Silicon Valley of the Renaissance, a place where art, technology, and business were all tangled up together. Architects learned perspective from painters. Silkmakers teamed up with gold beaters to invent new fabrics. Woodcarvers and engineers collaborated on mind-blowing theatrical machinery for public festivals. Leonardo's father got him an apprenticeship with Andrea del Verrocchio, who ran one of the hottest creative workshops in the city. This wasn't just an art studio. It was a creativity factory. One day they'd be sculpting bronze statues, the next designing festival banners, and the day after that studying anatomy and mechanics. This is where Leonardo really sharpened his ability to see. One of the core training exercises was drawing drapery, the folds in cloth. He'd shape little figures in clay, drape them with cloth soaked in plaster, and then spend hours drawing how light and shadow played across every fold. This seemingly boring exercise taught him one of his most powerful secrets. He realized the key to making a flat surface look three-dimensional wasn't drawing lines. It was mastering light and shadow. He called this chiaroscuro, Italian for light-dark. Then he took it even further. He noticed that in real life, objects don't have sharp, crisp outlines. Their edges are soft, blurry, bleeding into each other. So he invented a technique to capture this, which he called sfumato, meaning smoked. He learned to paint without hard lines, blending colors and shadows like smoke dissolving into air. This is why the Mona Lisa's smile is so maddeningly elusive. You see it, but you can't quite catch it. It's always shifting, always moving. His talent announced itself immediately. Legend has it that Verrocchio was working on a painting called The Baptism of Christ, and he let his young apprentice paint one of the angels. Leonardo's angel was so luminous, so impossibly alive, that it made Verrocchio's own work look stiff and lifeless by comparison. The biographer Giorgio Vasari tells us that Verrocchio was so humbled, he put down his paintbrush and never painted again. Whether that's completely true or not, it captures something real. A new force had arrived. But even as his artistic skills exploded, Leonardo's mind refused to stay in one lane. His curiosity pulled him in every direction at once. He never saw a wall between art and science. His scientific explorations fed directly into his art. He dissected cadavers to understand the muscles that move lips, then painted the world's most famous smile. He studied the mathematics of optics to understand how light strikes the eye, then created magical illusions of perspective in The Last Supper. Around 1482, at age 30, he decided Florence wasn't big enough for him anymore. He felt underappreciated. He wanted a patron who'd support not just his painting, but his wild engineering and scientific dreams. He set his sights on Milan, ruled by the powerful Duke Ludovico Sforza. This is when he wrote that famous letter, the one where he sold himself as a military engineer first, artist second. Most of the weapons and machines he bragged about existed only in his imagination and his notebooks. But what an imagination! His notebooks from this period overflow with fantastical and terrifying war machines. He drew scythed chariots with spinning blades on the wheels, designed to slice through soldiers like a demonic lawnmower. His drawings are so vivid you can practically hear the screams. Bodies cut in half, legs scattered across battlefields. He designed a giant crossbow 80 feet wide that had to be rolled on a carriage. And he sketched an armored tank, a turtle-like vehicle, powered by 8 men cranking gears inside, with cannons sticking out in every direction. These inventions lived in that sweet spot between brilliance and fantasy. He loved dancing on the edge between what was real and what was imagined. While everyone else saw limits, he saw possibilities. His first role in Milan wasn't designing weapons, though. It was being a court entertainer. He became the guy who produced pageants and theatrical shows. He designed elaborate costumes, built stage machinery that made planets spin and angels fly, and even composed music, performing it on a silver lyre he'd crafted in the shape of a horse's skull. This might sound like a waste of his genius, but it's where he really learned to merge art and engineering. He loved creating illusions, making the impossible feel real. And this theatrical experience deeply influenced his painting. The Last Supper, with its dramatic staging and exaggerated gestures, feels like a perfectly choreographed scene from a play. During his 17 years in Milan, Leonardo's intellectual passions went into overdrive. He started seriously studying anatomy, at first to improve his art, but soon because he was obsessed with understanding how bodies worked. In 1489, he created his first anatomical drawings with a breathtaking study of a human skull, sawed in half to reveal its inner spaces. He was the first person to correctly show the frontal sinus and draw a complete set of human teeth. He also mapped out an impossibly ambitious project, understanding the complete nature of humanity. He wanted to know everything. His proposed treatise on anatomy was supposed to start with conception in the womb, track human growth, describe the proportions of men and women, and analyze universal human emotions, joy, tears, fighting, fear. And naturally, it would explain what causes laughter. Around 1490, right in the middle of all this, he created what might be his most iconic drawing, one that perfectly captures his mission to unite art and science, the Vitruvian Man. The drawing was inspired by an ancient Roman architect named Vitruvius, who'd written that a perfectly proportioned man could fit inside both a circle and a square. Others had tried to draw this, including Leonardo's friends, but their attempts looked clumsy and forced. Leonardo, with his surgical understanding of anatomy and his feel for geometric beauty, created something transcendent. His Vitruvian Man isn't just a scientific diagram, it's gorgeous. The man's face is intense, his hair cascades in curls. He's simultaneously still and moving. A single figure in two poses, his arms and legs spread inside the heavenly circle, and standing firm inside the earthly square. With this one image, Leonardo captured the Renaissance belief in human dignity and his own philosophy, that humanity mirrors the universe, and we're all connected to creation through beautiful mathematical patterns. His biggest commission in Milan was painting The Last Supper on a monastery dining hall wall. He chose the most explosive moment in the story, the instant right after Jesus drops the bomb, "One of you will betray me." What follows is an emotional tsunami. Leonardo captures it perfectly. The apostles aren't frozen like statues. They're a whirlwind of shock, confusion, and accusation. He grouped them in threes, creating a rhythm of motion that ripples outward from the calm center of Jesus. Bartholomew, on the far left, leaps to his feet. Judas, wrapped in shadow, recoils, clutching his bag of silver. Peter, hot-headed as always, leans forward, gripping a knife. It's a masterclass in what Leonardo called portraying the motions of the mind. Every gesture, every expression, reveals what's happening in someone's soul. But in typical Leonardo fashion, his relentless innovation led to technical disaster. Traditional fresco painting meant applying paint to wet plaster, fast and unforgiving. Leonardo wanted to work slowly, layering his paints and perfecting every detail like he did with oil paintings on wood. So he experimented with a new technique, painting with tempera and oil directly onto a dry wall. It was a catastrophic failure. Within 20 years, the paint started flaking off. His masterpiece was already a ruin. Leonardo's personal life was just as unconventional as his work. He never married, never had kids. Throughout his life, he surrounded himself with beautiful young men who worked as his assistants and companions. The most famous was a boy named Gian Giacomo Caprati, who joined his household at age 10. He was so mischievous that Leonardo nicknamed him Salai, Little Devil. One contemporary described Salai as a graceful and beautiful youth with fine curly hair, in which Leonardo greatly delighted. The kid stole money, broke things, lied constantly, yet Leonardo adored him, dressed him in fine pink clothes, and kept him as his companion for over 25 years. Most historians believe their relationship was romantic. Leonardo's notebooks are filled with paired sketches, a craggy old warrior facing off against a beautiful androgynous boy with curls. These two faces, masculine and feminine, have been seen as symbols of the two sides of Leonardo's own nature. The boy often looks like Salai, with his soft features, full lips, and that hint of mysterious smile that would become Leonardo's signature. In 1499, the French army invaded Milan, and Leonardo's patron had to flee. His 17 years in the city ended abruptly. French archers used his giant clay model for the horse monument as target practice and destroyed it. He eventually returned to Florence in 1500, now a celebrated master. But he found himself in the shadow of a brilliant and difficult young rival, Michelangelo. The two men were complete opposites. Leonardo was handsome, elegant, charming, famous for his beautiful rose-colored tunics. Michelangelo was intense, disheveled, notoriously grumpy. Leonardo was a skeptic, a man of science. Michelangelo was deeply religious and tormented. Leonardo was gay and comfortable with it. Michelangelo was gay but anguished about it. Vasari tells a story of Michelangelo publicly insulting Leonardo in the streets of Florence, mocking him for his failure to finish the great horse monument in Milan. There was, as he put it, a very great disdain between them. This rivalry exploded when they were commissioned to paint two enormous battle murals on opposite walls of Florence's great council hall. It was a direct competition, a public showdown between the two greatest artists alive. Leonardo chose to paint the Battle of Anghiari, focusing on a chaotic, savage clash of men and horses fighting over a battle standard. His preparatory drawings are pure adrenaline, horses biting and kicking, eyes wild with fury, soldiers screaming, faces twisted in what he called most beastly madness. He wanted to capture both the terrifying brutality and the thrilling energy of war. Michelangelo, staying true to his obsessions, chose a completely different scene for his Battle of Cassina. Instead of combat chaos, he depicted Florentine soldiers surprised by an alarm while bathing in a river. His painting was basically an excuse to do what he did best: paint muscular, heroic male nudes in powerful, twisting poses. Leonardo was not impressed. He mocked Michelangelo's style, saying his figures looked like a sack of walnuts rather than the human form. He believed Michelangelo painted like a sculptor, obsessed with lines and form, missing the subtle magic of light, color, and atmosphere that made paintings truly alive. In the end, neither masterpiece was ever finished. Michelangelo got called to Rome by the Pope, and Leonardo, once again, struggled with a disastrous technical experiment. Trying to use his slow-drying oil paints on the wall, he created a mixture that wouldn't stick. The paint ran and peeled. He abandoned the project. The great artistic duel ended in a draw, with the rest of us as the losers. It was during this period in Florence, around 1503, that Leonardo started a small portrait of a local silk merchant's wife. Her name was Lisa del Giocondo. The painting would become known as the Mona Lisa. He worked on it for the rest of his life. For 16 years, he carried that small poplar panel wherever he went, to Milan, to Rome, finally to France. He never delivered it to the guy who commissioned it. It became a personal obsession, a laboratory for all his ideas about art, science, and what it means to be human. The Mona Lisa is the culmination of everything Leonardo ever learned. His scientific understanding of geology lives in the fantastical, ancient landscape behind her, a world of jagged rocks and winding rivers that seems to flow right into her body, connecting human flesh to the earth itself. His decades studying optics show up in how light falls on her face, and in the almost invisible veil covering her hair, so transparent you can barely see it. It's a reminder of his belief that we always see the world through a kind of veil, that reality is never quite as sharp as we think. And then, of course, there's the smile. It's the most famous smile in history precisely because you can't pin it down. It flickers. It seems to change as you look at it. 1 second she seems serene, the next subtly sad, then faintly amused. This isn't an accident. It's deliberate scientific and artistic genius. Leonardo knew from his optic studies that our eyes see things differently depending on whether we look directly or peripherally. The center of our retina catches detail, while the outer parts pick up shadows better. When you look directly at Mona Lisa's mouth, your eyes catch the fine details, and the smile seems to vanish. But when you look at her eyes or the background, you see her mouth in your peripheral vision. The fine lines blur, and the soft shadows at the corners of her lips make her seem to smile. It's a smile that lives in shadows, a smile that reveals itself only when you're not looking for it. It's a profound statement about human emotion itself, always a little elusive, always mysterious, always veiled. In 1516, at age 64, Leonardo received an invitation from the young king of France, Francis I. The king was obsessed with Italian culture and wanted to import the Renaissance. He offered Leonardo a title, first painter, engineer, and architect to the king. More importantly, he offered him a comfortable home, generous pay, and the one thing Leonardo had been searching for his whole life, a patron who valued his mind more than his output. Leonardo packed his bags one last time. He crossed the Alps into France, bringing his notebooks, his assistants, and 3 paintings he'd been working on for years and refused to part with: Saint John the Baptist, the Virgin and Child with Saint Anne, and the Mona Lisa. The king gave him a beautiful manor house called Clos Lucé, connected by an underground tunnel to the royal chateau. He didn't ask Leonardo to paint. He just wanted to talk with him. As Francis later told someone, there has never been another man born in this world who knew as much as Leonardo. He was truly a great philosopher. In these final years, Leonardo's mind didn't slow down. He designed a new royal palace and an entire ideal city. He planned elaborate pageants. He organized his notes. And he drew. His final series of drawings show a terrifying, apocalyptic flood. They're a vortex of swirling water and wind, a chaotic storm destroying the world. These drawings are the dark conclusion of his lifelong obsession with water. The gentle ripples of the Arno River from his first landscape drawing had become a furious, destructive torrent. They're powerful, frightening, deeply personal. The final outpourings of a mind wrestling with nature's awesome power, and perhaps his own mortality. One of the last pages in his notebooks shows him still wrestling with geometry problems, trying to square the circle. Then, in the middle of a calculation, he stops. He writes a final sentence in his elegant mirror script, Perché la minestra si fredda, because the soup is getting cold. And with that, the pen of history's most curious man falls silent. He died on May 2nd, 1519, at age 67. Vasari tells a beautiful, probably embellished story of King Francis rushing to his bedside, Leonardo dying in the arms of the king who'd finally given him the unconditional admiration he'd always sought. He left behind a trail of unfinished projects and scattered notes, but he also left a handful of masterpieces that would change art forever. More than that, he left us the example of a life lived in perpetual wonder. So what can we actually learn from this incredible life? What does Leonardo da Vinci, a guy who lived 5 centuries ago, have to teach us today? I think the most powerful lesson is about the nature of genius itself. We usually think of genius as something magical, a lightning bolt from the universe that you either get or you don't. But Isaacson's biography shows us that Leonardo's genius was something he built. It was a product of his will, his effort. It was rooted in skills that any of us can develop. First and foremost is his relentless curiosity. He never stopped asking why. He never outgrew that childlike sense of wonder that most of us lose somewhere along the way. He shows us that curiosity is a muscle, The more you use it, the stronger it gets. So start asking questions. When you see something interesting, don't just glance and scroll. Stop, really look at it. Ask yourself how it works. Go down the rabbit hole. It might not lead to a scientific breakthrough, but it'll make your life infinitely richer. Second, he teaches us to really observe. Leonardo's superpower was his ability to truly see the world. He didn't just look, he observed. He noticed the subtle way light falls on cloth, how a bird's wings move differently on the upstroke versus the downstroke, the tiny muscles that pull at the corner of a mouth to create a smile. We live in a world of constant distraction, where we're encouraged to scroll past everything. Leonardo's life is a wake-up call to slow down. Put away the phone and just look. Really see the patterns in tree leaves, or how water swirls in a bowl. That's where the world's beauty reveals itself. And finally, he shows us the magic of blurring lines. Leonardo refused to be put in a box. He didn't see walls between art and science, between reality and fantasy. To him, they were all part of the same beautiful, interconnected web. He understood that the greatest creativity happens at intersections, where different ideas collide. In our world that pushes us to specialize more and more, Leonardo's example reminds us to be polymaths, have diverse interests, read about history and science and art and poetry, learn new skills. Because you never know where the next great connection will come from. His life wasn't perfect. He was a champion procrastinator. He left a trail of unfinished projects. He could be moody and difficult. But even his flaws are inspiring. They make him human. They show us that genius isn't about being flawless. It's about having a passion so intense it sometimes trips over itself. That was the book summary of Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson. We've touched on the major currents of his incredible life today, but a summary is like looking at a map instead of taking the journey. The real magic of this book is in the details, the stories, the analysis of the art, the deep dive into the notebooks. If you felt a spark of curiosity today, if you felt a desire to see the world a little more like he did, I truly encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning history. It's an invitation to rediscover your own sense of wonder. The link to the book is in the description. Also, if this journey through Leonardo's mind brought you any value, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know these deep dives matter to you, and make sure you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together.